32 teams in 32 days. This is episode number 9. Let's welcome in Benjamin Allbright, Broncos reporter, host for KOA News Radio in Colorado. Ben, what's going on, my man?
Hey, what's going on, buddy?
Not much. Happy to have you here. Let's start with this. Two things were stressed this offseason for the Denver Broncos: secondary and Justin Simmons, even though Justin Simmons fits both those categories. So let's start with him. Kind of resetting the safety market, huge contract, one of the best at the position. How important was it to retain him?
Very important. And I think not just because of the player that he is on the field. I think it's also important because of the statement that makes in the locker room for a new general manager. The Broncos had previously kind of been a team that would go out and get free agents and kind of plug and play with them. And then they'd work through the draft, but they didn't really like draft and keep their guys. A common sentiment in the locker room was that you were playing for your next big money contract somewhere else. And so this offseason, the Broncos have really kind of they brought in general manager George Paton. John always steps down. And so they've really kind of had this mantra about, kind of taking care of your own and building in-house. And so they re-signing Shelby Harris and Justin Simmons, I think, really proved to that locker room that George Paton meant what he said about taking care of your own. And I think it gives the guys that they draft and everything the confidence that if they do the right things on and off the field, that they'll get taken care of by this organization.
Yeah, you mentioned Shelby Harris. I thought he was one of the more underrated free agents on the market. Denver ended up re-signing him. What did his market look like, and how important was this for Denver to get that done?
I think his market looked pretty good. I think Denver paid a little bit of a premium, but I think again, if you're George Paton, you're okay with that this year because you're trying to reestablish a certain culture. You're trying to make sure that guys understand that if they do the right things, they'll get paid here. And so, I think that I think he had a decent market. And it's not like he was going to be the number one free agent, but I think that I think it was necessary for this team to get both those guys paid in order to kind of establish what it is that Peyton's trying to establish.
Yeah, so re-signing Kareem Jackson, bringing in Kyle Fuller and Ronald Darby. I mean, this secondary has dudes right now. I don't know if it'll be 2015, but this has to be pretty exciting, no?
Yeah, it really does. And I'll tell you this, it was interesting behind the scenes. The Kareem Jackson thing wasn't just like Kareem coming back. It was the players kind of lobbying George Paton and saying, hey, look, we need this guy back. He provides leadership. He's a force in the locker room, but his veteran experience helps us out. And there's kind of an interesting story, behind how all these signings occurred, how this thing came together. Someday, I hope I'll be able to tell the whole part of it. But the fact that Justin signed his deal when he did allowed them to be able to pursue Fuller at the exact moment that he came available. Which led to, the going to get Kareem back and all that kind of stuff. So this thing all came together really because of the timing of Justin Simmons agreeing to his deal. And, the story behind the story is always more fun. But, you look at the talent level now and all of a sudden you said, hey, this could be something. You got Simmons and K-Jack back there. You added Fuller and Darby. You already had Bryce Callahan who played at a Pro Bowl level, last year. And then they've got some young talent on there that's just a little banged up that they want to develop. And, in Desang Bassi and then Michael Ojemudia. So, I think that there's some talent in the secondary. It's going to be interesting to see how it all comes together, and if they're able to generate the pass rush out of the front seven with hopefully having with Von Miller option picked up, hopefully having him healthy and Bradley Chubb healthy for maybe the first time together at the same time.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So Broncos picking at 9, 40, 71, and 104. No extra picks, none of that. Let's start with number 9. Some said corner. That's probably out the window now. Some think edge. Some say Parsons. Some think Parsons is both. There's a lot to think about with the number 9 pick. You mentioned the defensive line. What do you see them leaning towards at pick number 9?
I think it's going to be a trade back, honestly. I know a lot of people think quarterback at this point, but it really just depends on what quarterback is there. So I think it's going to be a trade back. It could be if the right player fell, if the right player fell, I guess maybe, but I really think it's going to be a trade back if they find the right guy, get everything swapped there. If they had to pick a player there, it's tough because I tried to tell everybody I don't think they were going corner from the get-go. I don't think that Micah Parsons is going to be there or in play. I think he's going to go to Detroit. So I think that looking at the way this thing is kind of playing out, I think they'd like to trade back, and depending on how far they trade back, that really kind of changes the position of what they do. They go into the mid-teens, you're probably looking at an edge rusher, a rotational guy to give you some leverage on Von Miller and Bradley Chubb in the future. Both have contracts that'll be coming up here fairly soon. You go further back than that, you get back in the 20s, and I think that maybe you're looking at a running back. Maybe you're looking at Najee Harris, somebody to pair as a 1-2 punch with Melvin Gordon. And when Gordon's contract and the money on Gordon's contract done at the end of the year, you maybe go in a different direction on that. So I think that I think there are different options, and it really just depends on how far back that they go.
Yeah, and so that's starting at 9. Do you see them moving potentially even like past like 24, 25? Like how far do you really think that they're willing to go? Because like I said, they don't have any of those extra picks, and a team that could use some more young players. How far do you really see them going down?
Well, I don't know. I think they could go back into the 20s. I think probably Chicago is probably the stop point. I think that's probably where you land. And then with the extra picks that you have, you could maybe trade for a Sam Darnold or a Gardner Minshew or Nick Foles or something like that. That gives you a little bit of competition for Drew Lock. And then, you could get your guy back there and have future picks on top of it. So, I don't think that they want to go back to like the 30s. I don't think that's the case, but I do think that going backwards allows them to be more versatile, build the war chest here in the first year of George Payton's tenure as general manager, and kind of have something to go forward. And, I think that if you look at the way this thing's playing out with the quarterback situation and everything else, if you're running it back with Locke, you want to have the ammo next year to be able to get up and get your guy if Locke doesn't work out. And so I think that that a trade back accomplishes that.
Yeah, so Drew Lock still barely having one full season under his belt. Took a bit of a step back in 2020, though. I know you've supported him in the past. The Broncos didn't want to bring in a backup or at least competition. They said no to Trubisky, as you said a couple days ago. It seems like they like him. What's the future for Drew Lock?
Well, they like him and they don't want to give up on him, but at the same time, they have to recognize the reality of what he's played at so far and have someone capable of playing if he flames out, this season. So, I think that's where it's at. I don't think that, you've got a fan base that's kind of in revolt and, this guy sucks and, all this kind of stuff. But internally, most of them are, like what he brings to the table and hoping he can take that jump, but they also know that they have to hedge their bet. And so that's kind of where they're at with it. I think that if the right quarterback were to fall, that'd be a different story. But I think that as it sits right now, they're kind of eyeballing a Lock plus competition kind of thing. And if Lock doesn't take the job, then they'll be all in on a quarterback next year.
So with some potential for a competition there, whether it's Darnold, whether it's Minshew, could you see them spending a second or third on Kyle Trask?
I don't think so. I don't think that would happen. And Kyle Trask, I highly doubt he's even taken on day 2. I think he's a day 3 guy. As far as day 2 quarterbacks, there's really like 4 or 5 quarterbacks in this draft, and that's it. People talking about, because people misunderstand when I'm saying that next year's quarterback class might be better. What I'm saying is there's more viable quarterbacks in next year's class than there are in this one. Because after Mac Jones, after the first 5 quarterbacks, there really isn't this draft. I mean, you're going to see somebody take a day 2 chance on Kellen Mond probably, and then the rest of them are all going to go day 3. And you're going to have 2 or 3 guys on day 3, and it'll be Jamie Newman, Kyle Trask, maybe Buechele. Maybe Ehlinger, guys like that. And so that's really what you're left with when it all comes down to it. So I don't think this class is particularly strong. It's just a little bit top heavy, and you got a bunch of thirsty teams there at the top. And so that's what causes, it reminds you of the year Cam Newton was drafted and everybody talks about, this is a great class. You're going to have 4 quarterbacks go in the top 12. Well, those 4 quarterbacks were Cam Newton, Blaine Gabbert, Jake Locker, and Christian Ponder. And so, it really wasn't a great class. You just had a bunch of guys drafted early because teams are thirsty for quarterbacks. And so, I think that's kind of the situation with this one. You got 2 really good quarterbacks. You got 2 kind of project guys, and then you've got another one that's kind of just a guy, and that's really it. Long story short, I don't think the Broncos are in on Kyle Trask at all, and I don't think that they would take him. I don't think they would take him on day 2.
Okay, so real quick, you mentioned two guys, 2 projects. Who are the 2 guys? Is it's Lawrence, and then is it Fields or Wilson for you?
Well, it's Lawrence and Wilson. I mean, there are more than a handful of teams that have Wilson as the number one QB on their board. There's probably about a half a dozen teams that have him over Lawrence. I know people laugh at that, but it's true. I'll tell you that the quarterback with the most variance in the grades is Fields. There are teams that think that he's a top 5 guy, and there are teams that think that they wouldn't touch him until day 3. He's the one with the most variance. I think Fields and Lance are the kind of the projects. Fields is interesting because he doesn't identify the blitz very well, and he holds the ball too long. The tools are obvious, but there's other things going on there. And so I think you got to look at that. And then you got Trey Lance, who's got all the upside in the world. I mean, dude's got a bleeping bazooka, but he's raw, has almost no starts. And, you're going to have to figure out how long the developmental ramp up curve is for him. And then you got Mac Jones, who's kind of just a guy. Like, I don't understand the hype on him. It's just weird to me. People are calling him the next Tom Brady. And I'm like, man, Tom Brady's not even the next Tom Brady at this point. Like, it's interesting to see the Mac Jones stuff because I see, Brian Hoyer, not Tom Brady.
Yeah, I'll say this about Mac, and I've been higher on him because I remember throughout the season it was Mac Jones versus Kyle Trask with the Heisman, and people were considering Trask as the better prospect. Trask isn't. I just think Mac Jones does a beautiful football, and I think he could translate quickly in the NFL. He'll probably come in, maybe be a bench player to start, but I think his traits are there.
I'm not saying he can't be a starter in the league. I'm just saying, like, he's a less athletic Andy Dalton when all's said and done. Like, he doesn't have plus arm strength. He doesn't have plus athleticism. What plus trait does he have? He's kind of just a guy. He's like, Kirk Cousins. He comes in and, he can kind of handle things, but he's never going to put a team on his back.
And that's what I said, or what I've been telling everyone about Kyle Trask is, yeah, Mac Jones isn't great. Mac Jones has a better arm and he's more athletic than Kyle Trask. So, like, what do you see in Kyle Trask?
Size.
Yeah,
Size.
Exactly.
And then you got with Trask, you also have a guy who's carried by the talent around him. Like, you could say that about Mac Jones. You look at that great offensive line, the receivers, the running backs, and all that kind of stuff. But Kyle Trask had incredible talent around him. Pitts is going to be a stud in the league. Tony, for what he is, will be good. Now, he's not. I don't think he's an all-around receiver. He's more of a gadget guy. But you look at the talent that Florida had and how Trask underperformed with it. And to me, that's on the QB.
Yeah, and especially as a Broncos guy, that size for quarterback is not everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So looking at the roster, it's gradually getting better. I'd say a lot of young players, especially skill players, multiple new wide receivers trying to find their footing. They stacked up on receiver last year. I mean, Judy, Hamler, Tyree Cleveland. Do you see them stacking up on a positional or stacking up on a specific position group this year in the draft?
Linebackers, whether inside or outside, you might see some linebackers that might stack up on, especially with, like I said, Chubb and Vaughn are both coming up on tracks. So you might want to make sure that you've got a guy there that you're comfortable with replacing one of them if you need to replace one of them. Not that they would, just saying. And then the inside linebacker position, you got Alexander Johnson and then just a bunch of bodies. They like Justin Strnad. Now, he got hurt last year in training camp, so they didn't get to roll him out. They had to roll Josie Jewell, but they've been trying to find that second inside backer, for a while. And Alexander Johnson's been one. Josie Jewell, who's more of a special teams rundown kind of guy, and then they brought in Mark Barron, and then he never got to play because he was hurt. They brought in Nigel Bradham. He didn't get to play because he was hurt. So it's just been it's been one after the other. And so I think that the linebacker position, there's going to be a lot of attention paid to that in this draft, and then they'll draft a safety because they'll have to replace Kareem Jackson after the season.
Yeah. So you mentioned linebacker, not a great linebacker class. I would say the sweet spot's around 2 or 3. So they're probably, like you said, not going Parsons at 9. If he even gets there, I don't think he will. Even with the off the field stuff, the talent is magnificent there. So the sweet spot for linebackers probably rounds 2 or 3. The Zaven Collins, the Nick Boltons. What do you see as a scheme fit potentially on day 2 for linebacker?
I guess that depends on who's there. You mentioned Collins. I think that's his second. They'd love to, make that happen. I don't know he's going to be there. You got Jamin? What's his face? He's going to be. He'd be one they would eyeball. Had that big time vertical. I think he's somebody you eyeball there. Baron Browning, I think, is somebody you kind of look at. There's a day 2 really is, like you just said, kind of the sweet spot for guys like that. So I think there'll be plenty. I think they'll just look to see who's there and go from there.
So Jerry Jeudy did not have quite the rookie campaign as some originally hoped, but there's zero reason to get compared to, what Justin Jefferson did. Jefferson was in the perfect situation. Jeudy not so much. Like, I don't think there's any reason to believe that Jeudy can't reach his ceiling, but I think that has to start in 2021.
He's got to cut out the drops. I mean, that's the main thing. It's just concentration lapses too. I mean, you're talking about a guy trying to take off and run without the ball in his hands, and it was a problem, and it really affected the Broncos because a lot of those were clutch situation type stuff that they needed a play from him. If he'd caught the one on the drive on Tennessee, that would have led to a first down, could have had them scoring, and could have put the game away and gotten a win. There were other key passes that he had throughout the season that he just dropped that could have been key down movers. It could have been, key chain movers that would have kept drives alive. So he's got to cut that out if he's going to be the guy. That's really the thing. I mean, everybody you talk to, and one of the things I always do when I'm interviewing opponents, I ask who they, about the guys they played against. And I'll tell you, the corner there from Miami, Xavier Howard, that's all he could do was rant rage about Jeudy was so good with routes. And keeping guys off balance and all that kind of stuff with the dead leg stuff. So Judy's got the other stuff now. He's just got to learn how to hang on to the football. Be a lot better no matter who's throwing the ball.
All right, so let's play a quick game. I'm gonna name a couple prospects, and you're gonna tell me if they're there at 9 or second round, who you'd take. So let's start with this: Micah Parsons, Caleb Farley.
Can I pass on both?
Really? You don't like Parsons?
Yeah, I don't want Parsons off field. It's not just the injury stuff. You don't want to play physical with big receivers. You can't cut. I think he's one more class. I like J.C. Horn and Pat Surtain a lot better than those two. Than him. Sorry.
So would you take either of those two corners at 9?
Horn or Surtain? I mean, Horn or Surtain?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have no problem with that. And one of them is going to go 10. It just depends on which one Dallas likes better anyway. So, yes, I would take either one at 9.
Kwity Paye, Jalen Phillips.
Kwity Paye.
Yeah, I mean, so Paye,
Phillips got to go. Yeah, Phillips' medical history is you just can't burn the first rounder on that. Like, there's all the talent in the world there, but his medicals and everything else, you just cannot burn a first rounder on that.
Azeez Ojulari or Zaven Collins?
It's so funny, man. My radio partner would go with Ojulari, but I'd go with Collins. That's one of those ones we've been arguing about for a while. We argue about during the breaks. I like Collins a lot better.
So Ojulari is my edge one. I think that guy. I think that guy has so much to work with, so much speed, a lot of power. The one thing with him is that he doesn't have like multiple moves. He kind of has that swim move that he uses a lot, but that his bowl game performance was second to none. I know James Hudson got knocked out, and that was part of it, but a lot to like with Ojulari, and I'm just as high on Collins. Like, he's my linebacker 2 or 3 behind Parsons, and then the kid from Notre Dame, Owusu Komoroa, however you pronounce his name.
I just call him Joke because I can never pronounce it.
Yeah, same, pretty much. So a lot of fresh faces on the offensive line. Cushenberry's new. Glasgow brought over from Detroit last year. Dalton Risner, only in year 2, has moved around a bit, but seems like he has his home at left guard. Hopefully, Netane Muti can be healthy because that guy is a food truck. What are your overall thoughts on the offensive line, and is it a need going forward?
I don't really think so. I think the only position you need to get long-term addressed would be right tackle. You get Jawan James back, who was an opt-out last year. If he decides he actually wants to play football this year, he could be something. But then after that, your tackle depth's a little thin. You got Calvin Anderson, who played well in one start and replacement of Garrett Bowles, but you only got the one game on him, and it was against Carolina, who wasn't exactly killing folks last year. So I think the right tackle position is one you need to identify, but they're fine beyond that. Cush needs to get functionally stronger throughout the offseason. If not, you could see a scenario where Glasgow kicks over to center and Netane Muti goes to right guard because, as you said, he was a food truck and is. That's a mountain of a man. So you could see something like that to get a little bit more power and push. This season, if Cush doesn't get functionally stronger, he got worked a little bit, and it affected Drew Lock. I mean, you go back and look at the Atlanta tape, and you can see Cush get dumped into Drew Lock's lap by Grady Jarrett, and without much effort too. So that's the thing with Cushenberry. It was never about his run blocking. It was about his pass blocking and, his functional strength to hold up. He's got to get stronger. If he can do that, then I think the line is set.
So you talked about running backs. Who are the top 3 on your board? Whether it's first round or second round.
Yeah, the 1 and 2 are pretty easy. It's it's Etienne and Najee Harris, depending on what you're looking for. After that is where everybody's got differing opinions. I like the kid out of Memphis a little bit. Both those North Carolina backs are nice. Now I even like Ramondre Stevenson. I know some people don't like him, but I'm a big fan of the big guy from Oklahoma. So I think there's talent there, but I think that Etienne and or Najee and Etienne are 1 and 2, and it's after that it's a big drop to what people have in terms of other backs. So I think that those got a chance of going.
All right, real quick before I let you go, if you're the GM, who's your pick at 9, and then who do you think they'll take?
I think they'll trade back.
Okay.
I'm really confident about that. Unless something just changes drastically and back out of the first 8 picks, I think they trade back. That said, if they were stuck at 9 and they had to make them, who's available? Who's already been picked?
Pitts?
Well, what I'm saying is who has already been picked. So
okay, let's talk. Okay, so the 4 quarterbacks, maybe even 5, so let's go 4 non-quarterbacks. So we have Pitts, Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell, and then Jalen Waddle are all gone. In addition to 5 quarterbacks.
In that case, I don't think Waddle's going to be gone at that point. I think that and even Sewell may not be gone Slater, but in that case, you'd have a choice between basically Slater and Parsons. What you're going to do there? You get the right tackle in the future. Who you have to have a very strong coach there to kind of his personality issues. So I think it would be between Noah Parsons simply because Vic Fangio's dealt with the Packers. They've had issues, and he's open. But it could be the one.
Yeah, so there's a lot to like with Micah Parsons. Great stuff from Benjamin Allbright. Ben, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to episode 9 of 32 Teams in 32 Days. I'll catch you in the next one.